Welcome to the 8-Minute Devotion with Pastor Cameron Walcott. The 8-Minute Devotion is a daily message that exists to give you hope, encouragement, and life as we look together at the Word of God. And now, the 8-Minute Devotion.
Hello, and welcome back to the 8-Minute Devotion on this Tuesday. Here we are as we continue our series on Our Story, Love in His Hands. We're talking about the love story between my wife, the lovely and talented Delia, and I, how God led us together. This week, we're really focusing on marriage tips. This is our third week in the series, and we're really focusing on tips of how we can have godly, healthy marriages for the glory of God. Yesterday, we talked about the power of promise, how marriage is for life, how our vows mean something. Our vows have power. We shouldn't take them lightly, but our vows have a real power. And today, we're going to talk now. The topic today, our title today is The Joy of Sacrifice. The joy of sacrifice. What does this have to do with marriage? This topic, the joy of sacrifice. What are we talking about in the context of marriage? Well, the thing is this. In a marriage, there are going to be times that you need to sacrifice for your spouse. As a husband, there are going to be times you need to sacrifice for your wife. As a woman, as a wife, there will be times, I don't have firsthand experience, but I'm sure it's true. As a wife, there are times you're going to need to sacrifice for your husband. And what we're going to see today, what we're going to talk about is that when we have that opportunity to sacrifice for our spouse, to lay down our rights, to lay down our desires for our spouses, instead of looking at it as a painful thing or something I must do. I have to sacrifice. I have to give up my way, but I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good wife. So I'm going to do it and I'm just going to suffer. What we're going to see today is that instead of having that attitude, that it's such a difficult thing, we should realize that in sacrificing and surrendering ourselves, there actually is great joy. There actually is great blessing. It is a joy to serve others, and it is a joy to serve our spouse. You look at Hebrews 12 and verse 2. It talks about when Jesus was on the cross, and it says that for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. You see, the sacrifice Jesus made was much bigger than what we're going to have to make in a marriage. He sacrificed his very life. He left heaven and came to earth. Jesus made the supreme sacrifice. But why was he able to do it? Was it just because he was so tough? Was it just because of his internal discipline and his internal obedience? Now, of course, Jesus had that all in spades. He was the Son of God. But it says in Hebrews 12 that actually the reason he endured the sacrifice, the reason he went through it all, was because of the joy set before him. Jesus saw the joy on the other end of his sacrifice. Jesus himself was not motivated just by a sense of duty. He was not motivated just by a sense of discipline. He was motivated by the joy that was set before him. He was motivated because he saw the joy that if he gave his life on the cross, all of us who believe in him, we would be with him in heaven forever. That was the joy that he saw on the other end of his sacrifice. And you see, friends, in our marriages, we must realize that there is a joy in sacrificing. There is a joy in giving our spouse their way. There is a joy in sacrifice. Don't look at it as a bad thing. Don't even keep score. Well, you gave up, I gave up my way yesterday. You have to give up your way today. And then we take turns. And there is a better way, even than compromising. That is joyful sacrifice, willing sacrifice by both parties in the marriage. You know, I tell you, when my wife, the lovely and talented Delia, and I, when we were first married, we had a giant problem in our relationship. Wow, we had a giant problem. Do you want to know what the problem was? I assume you do. The problem was this. She liked to eat at KFC. I liked to eat at McDonald's. She liked KFC. I liked, hey, don't judge us. We were really young back then. We were in our 20s and living in Singapore. Don't judge, okay? Don't judge. But she liked KFC. I liked McDonald's. And, of course, that's a trivial small thing. But still, I learned a lesson in that when we were out and when we needed to get fast food, a couple times a month, when we needed to do this, I learned that when I would fight for my way and say, McDonald's, 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 at the end, I never really had joy. At the end, I was never really satisfied when I fought and insisted. Now, I don't mean fought like we screamed at each other. We never did. But I just mean that if I insisted and said, well, no, it's McDonald's today, I never really had joy. But when I when I gave in, when I sacrificed, when I said, I'm looking out for what's best for you, not what's best for me. That's when we found joy. And of course, conversely, my wife, she didn't say, haha, now he's going to give me McDonald's all the time because he learned he has to sacrifice. No, she did exactly the same thing. And we would learn that, we would learn how to serve each other. And when she had the choice and the influence, then we'd go to McDonald's because she wanted to give in to me. When I had the choice and the influence, then we'd go to KFC because I wanted to give her what she desired. And instead of keeping score, McDonald's today, then KFC, McDonald's. No, we learn not just to compromise, but something better than compromise, and that is joyful sacrifice. There are some marriages where the husband and wife, they take turns. They keep score. They say, well, you had this many, I get this many. You had your way that day, I get my way today. And of course, compromise is better than arguing. If your option is either have a fight or compromise, then compromise. But I'm telling you, there's something even better than compromise. There's something even better than keeping score, and that is joyfully sacrificing, serving the other party, putting their needs, putting their desires above your own. This reminds us of our need as a husband and wife to live in peace. Romans 12:15 says, as much as is possible in everything you do, live peaceably with all men. And if that's the command, to live in peace with all men as much as we can, how much more would that be the command with our own spouse? How much more would the Lord say, as much as is possible, as much as you can do, live in peace with your spouse, live in peace, and don't be men and women of arguing. Live in peace. And that will happen when we are quick to sacrifice. It is possible. I want to tell you this, friends. It is possible to have a marriage without squabbling, without arguing. And I know a lot of marriage counselors, even Christian ones, will say, look, you're going to fight. Just learn how to fight well. There's might be a measure of truth there, but I believe it's really possible to have a marriage without any real arguing. My wife and I have been married 14 years. We've never really raised our voices at each other. We've obviously never physically fought in any way, but even, raising our voices or getting angry. Of course, we've had conflicts. Times I want to go one way, she wants to go the other, but by the grace of God, we've learned in those moments to sacrifice, to serve the other one, to look at things through the eyes of the other one. For me, to look at things through Dilia's eyes and do what's best for her. For Dilia to look at things through my eyes and try to do what's best for me. We've learned in those moments not to have a conflict where we go back and forth and get upset and raise our voices, but where we have peace. We can live peaceably with all men. It doesn't mean it's going to be that way for every couple every time, but I'm telling you, it is possible. Don't buy into it that you have to have these fights in a marriage. You don't. You can live in peace with your spouse, and it is a glorious, glorious thing. I can attest to that. It's been my tale in my marriage. It can be that way in you. As we learn to joyfully sacrifice for the other, we can live in peace. God will be glorified. See you tomorrow on the 8-Minute Devotion.
Thank you for listening to the 8-Minute Devotion. We trust you've been encouraged and blessed today. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or by visiting the8minutedevotion.podbean.com. For questions or comments, please email us at the8minutedevotion@gmail.com or visit our Facebook page. We would love to hear from you.